The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with tension. Delegates from hundreds of star systems had gathered, their holographic and physical forms present in the massive circular chamber. Some species sat in levitating chairs, others stood on floating platforms, and a few simply projected their presence as shimmering energy. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Elias Carter, the sole human representative, calm and composed despite the heated discussions taking place around him. "The time has come," boomed the voice of High Chancellor HFY, leader of the HFY Dominion. His tall, armored form gleamed under the Council's artificial lights. "Humanity has proven itself reckless, dangerous, and uncontrollable. We must remove them from the Galactic Council before they bring ruin upon us all." Murmurs and clicks of agreement echoed through the chamber. Many species had grown uneasy about humanity's rapid rise in the galactic community. Humans were unpredictable, always pushing the limits, always challenging the ancient traditions of the Council. They had survived where others had fallen. They had fought against impossible odds and won. To some, this made them inspiring. To others, it made them a threat. A representative from the Valerian Empire, a race of crystalline beings, leaned forward. "Ambassador Carter," she said in a sharp, chiming voice, "what do you have to say in humanity's defense? Your kind has interfered in galactic affairs, broken long-standing treaties, and disrupted the balance of power. Do you deny these accusations?" Elias Carter folded his hands on the table in front of him. His blue eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of his allies and enemies alike. He knew this moment would come. Humanity had always been seen as an anomaly, a species that defied expectations, refused to bow, and adapted faster than any race before them. "I do not deny that humans have changed things," Carter said, his voice steady. "But I ask you this, when has change ever been a crime?" The chamber fell silent. Even the most vocal critics paused to hear his words. "The Galactic Council was formed to ensure peace and cooperation," Carter continued. "Yet, for centuries, you followed the same rigid laws, fearing anything that threatened the status quo. And then humans arrived. We didn't follow every unwritten rule. We didn't accept things just because they had always been that way. We challenged injustice. We fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And yes, sometimes we made enemies, but we also made allies. Many of you sit here today because humanity stood by you when no one else would." A low growl came from the HFY leader. "You mean to say that your violations of Council law were justified?" Carter shook his head. "I mean to say that humanity is not perfect, but we do not stand for tyranny. We do not sit idly by while the strong prey upon the weak. If that makes us dangerous, then perhaps the Council should ask itself, dangerous to whom?" A few murmurs of approval rose from the crowd. The Ralkesh, a feline-like species that had once been enslaved by the HFY, nodded in silent support. The Ulari, a peaceful aquatic race whose colonies had been saved by human intervention, looked thoughtful. But the opposition was strong. The HFY Dominion had powerful allies, and they were determined to see humanity removed. The argument was not over yet. The High Chancellor narrowed his glowing red eyes. "You speak well, human, but words are not enough. We will present our case with evidence. We will show the Council why humanity is a threat, and when we are done, there will be no choice but to cast you out." Carter remained still, but inside, he knew the battle had begun. Humanity's place in the galaxy was on the line, and he would not let them be erased without a fight. The Council chamber grew quiet as the High Chancellor, HFY, stepped forward. His armored form shimmered under the artificial lights, and his piercing red eyes scanned the room, ensuring all attention was on him. He lifted a clawed hand, activating a massive holographic screen in the center of the chamber. The screen flickered to life, showing a series of recorded events, each one a so-called crime committed by humanity. "We begin with the Battle of Vorkan 7. HFY announced, his deep voice carrying through the hall. The screen displayed a war-torn planet, smoke rising from the battlefield. Human soldiers in advanced combat suits fought side by side with a smaller alien race, the Talvas, a species known for their frail bodies but brilliant minds. Against them stood the Grizzle, a war-hungry empire that had enslaved entire civilizations. Zelthor pointed a sharp claw at the screen. The Talvas were losing this war. It was a natural conflict between two species, and yet humans interfered. They supplied weapons, technology, and even their own soldiers, tipping the balance of power and changing the outcome. A reptilian delegate from the Grizzle Empire hissed. Because of the humans, our expansion was halted. We lost hundreds of warships, thousands of warriors. They disrupted the natural order. Ambassador Elias Carter leaned forward, his expression unreadable. You mean to say we stopped your conquest? The Talvas were being wiped out, their people slaughtered. We did what was right. Zelthor sneered. It is not the Council's place to determine what is right. It is our duty to maintain balance. Carter smirked. Balance or control? A few murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber, but Zelthor ignored them. He waved his hand, and the hologram shifted again. This time, it showed a diplomatic meeting between human representatives and a race known as the Zayari. This, Zelthor continued, is the so-called Zayari Accord, a direct violation of Council trade laws. The humans formed exclusive alliances, offering technology in exchange for resources, bypassing the proper channels. This act alone should have resulted in immediate expulsion. A council member from the Trade Coalition nodded. Humanity has been reckless with its influence. We have rules for a reason, Ambassador Carter. Carter met their gaze without hesitation. And those rules were designed to protect the powerful, not the weak. The Zayari were being exploited under outdated council policies. We simply gave them a fair deal, one they accepted willingly. Zelthor's patience was wearing thin. He raised a hand again, and the screen shifted to a different scene. It showed a council assembly from years ago, where a human general stood before an audience, delivering a fiery speech. This, Zelthor growled, is General Marcus Steele, a war hero of your species. But instead of diplomacy, listen to what he told his people. The recording played. Steele's voice rang out through the chamber. They fear us because we refuse to kneel. They want to control us, limit us, dictate how we should grow. But humanity has never asked permission to rise. And we never will. Zelthor turned back to the council. This is the true nature of humanity. Arrogant, defiant, uncontrollable. They do not seek unity. They seek dominance. That is why they must be removed. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some species nodded in agreement, while others whispered among themselves. The accusations were serious, but the humans had their supporters too. Carter slowly stood up, adjusting his coat. His voice remained calm, yet firm. What I see here are not charges. I see proof of why humanity belongs in this council. A silence fell over the room. Even Zelthor looked surprised. Carter stepped forward. You accuse us of interfering, but we stand up for those who cannot fight for themselves. You accuse us of breaking trade laws, but we make fair deals where others exploit. You accuse us of defiance, but it is our refusal to be controlled that makes us strong. He turned to the other delegates. So I ask you all, if the Galactic Council truly stands for justice, if it truly represents all species, then why would you remove the one race that refuses to bow to tyranny? The room was divided. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. The council chamber was in chaos. Delegates whispered among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Ambassador Carter's words, while others glared at him with open hostility. The High Chancellor Zelthor remained still, his crimson eyes burning with anger. The accusations against humanity had been laid out, but instead of cowering, the human ambassador had turned them into a defense. This was exactly why the Zelthor Dominion feared humanity. They were impossible to break. A representative of the Yulari, a water-dwelling species known for their wisdom, raised a finned hand to speak. Ambassador Carter's words hold weight, she said, her voice smooth and flowing like a gentle stream. We cannot ignore the fact that humans have saved many species. My own people would have been wiped out if not for their intervention. A sharp clicking sound came from the Grozol delegate, his scaled hands tightening into fists. They interfere where they do not belong. They pick and choose which wars to fight, who to help, and who to let suffer. How is that fair? A booming laugh came from the Ralkesh representative, a feline warrior with glowing yellow eyes. Fair, he growled. You mean the way the council fairly ignored my people when we were being slaughtered by the HFY. The only reason my kind still exists is because the humans fought beside us. If fairness means standing aside while the strong devour the weak, then I say let humanity break every rule they want. The tension in the room grew. Sides were being drawn. Some species, like the Yulari and Ralkesh, stood with humanity. Others, like the Grozol and the Trade Coalition, demanded their removal. The air felt thick with the weight of an impending decision. Zelthor stood tall, slamming his staff against the floor. Enough, he roared. The chamber fell silent once more. He turned his gaze to Carter, his expression unreadable. You claim that humanity fights for justice, but I see something different. I see a species that refuses to follow the laws that keep this council together. What happens when a race that does not respect rules is allowed to remain among us? Carter took a deep breath. He had expected this argument. Rules should serve the people, not the other way around, he replied. If the laws of this council force us to turn our backs on those in need, then maybe those laws need to change. A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. The idea of changing the council's rules was unthinkable to many, but to others it was a necessary evolution. The room was now more divided than ever. The representative of the Valerian Empire, a crystalline being with a shimmering form, finally spoke. This debate has reached an impasse. There is only one solution: a vote. Zelthor smirked. Very well. The council shall decide humanity's fate with a final vote. In 3 days, the verdict will be delivered. Until then, no human representative may speak further in this chamber. Carter gave a slow nod, his mind already working on the next move. He knew that in 3 days, humanity's place in the galaxy would be sealed, and he wasn't about to leave it up to fate. As he left the chamber, whispers followed him. Some were in his favor, others were against him. But one thing was clear. Humanity's fight was far from over. Elias Carter strode through the towering corridors of the Galactic Council building, his mind racing. The vote was set in 3 days. 3 days to ensure humanity wasn't cast out. He couldn't just sit back and hope for the best. He had to act. As he exited the council chamber, a familiar voice called out, "Ambassador Carter." He turned to see Ariavel, the Yulari delegate, approaching. Her translucent blue skin shimmered under the artificial lights, her large eyes filled with concern. "You don't have much time," she said softly. "The XL Thar are working behind the scenes, rallying support against you. If you don't convince more council members to stand with humanity, the vote will not go in your favor." Carter sighed. He had expected as much. The XL Thar played politics like a war strategy, eliminating threats before they had a chance to strike back. "Who's still undecided?" he asked. Aria's gills fluttered as she glanced at her datapad. The Valerian Empire, the Drex Consortium, and the Zen-Kai Dominion have yet to take a clear stance. If you can win them over, humanity might have a chance. Carter nodded. Then I better start knocking on doors. The Valerian Dilemma. Carter's first stop was the Valerian delegation. The Valerians were crystalline beings, their bodies made of living, glowing minerals. Their leader, Chancellor Lyris, was a towering figure of violet and gold, his voice resonating like a deep chime. "We do not make decisions lightly, Ambassador Carter," Lyris said, his many-faceted eyes reflecting Carter's image back at him. Humanity is bold, but boldness alone does not make a species worthy of the Council. Carter met Lyris's gaze. You of all people should understand that sometimes tradition must be broken for the sake of progress. The Council fears change, but change is necessary for survival. Lyris was silent for a moment before finally speaking. Convince me of one thing, Ambassador. If humanity remains in the Council, will they seek power, or will they seek balance? Carter didn't hesitate. We will seek justice. Lyris studied him for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he said, the Valerian Empire will consider this carefully. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a rejection either. Carter would take what he could get. The Drex Consortium's price. The Drex were a race of insectoid traders, their entire society built around commerce and profit. Their leader, Minister Caltris, was a shrewd negotiator, his compound eyes constantly shifting as he observed Carter. This is not about morality, Caltris said. The Drex Consortium supports what is best for business. If humanity remains in the Council, how does that benefit us? Carter knew exactly how to play this game. If humans are expelled, do you really think trade will continue as normal? The HFY will use this as a precedent to remove anyone who doesn't fit their vision of order. Today, it's humanity. Tomorrow, it could be the Drex. Caltris clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. A compelling argument. But words are not enough. What do you offer in return? Carter smirked. Exclusive human trade deals with the Drex Consortium for the next 10 years. No tariffs. Caltris's antennae twitched with interest. Now that is an offer worth considering. Another uncertain ally, but Carter was making progress. The Zenkai decision. The final stop was the Zenkai Dominion. They were one of the oldest members of the Council, a species of reptilian philosophers who rarely took sides in political matters. Their leader, Grand Sage Vostell, was a towering figure of green and silver, his deep voice filled with wisdom. The Zenkai do not rush decisions, Ambassador, Vostell said. We consider the past, present, and future before choosing a path. Carter leaned forward. Then consider this. If humanity is removed, the balance of the Council shifts. The HFY grows stronger, and their way of thinking becomes law. Do you really believe they will stop with humanity? Vostell's golden eyes narrowed. You suggest that removing one species will lead to the fall of others. Carter nodded. History has shown us that when the powerful eliminate dissent, they do not stop until they control everything. Vostell was silent for a long time. Then, at last, he spoke. The Zenkai will meditate on this. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. The countdown begins. Carter returned to his quarters, exhausted but determined. The vote was approaching, and the fate of humanity still hung in the balance. He had planted the seeds of doubt in the undecided factions, but would it be enough? The HFY would not sit idly by. They would fight until the very last moment to see humanity cast out, and Carter would be ready. 3 days, 3 chances to shift the tide. Failure was not an option. Carter stood by the large window in his quarters, staring at the sprawling cityscape of the Galactic Council's capital. The artificial lights flickered like stars, but tonight, they felt more like warnings. He had made progress, but it wasn't enough. The Valerians, the Drex, and the Zenkai were still undecided. If even one of them sided with the HFY, humanity would be finished. A chime sounded at his door. Carter turned, already knowing this wouldn't be good news. As the door slid open, Ariavel stepped in, her face tense. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Carter sighed. Of course we do. What is it now? She handed him a datapad. The HFY aren't waiting for the vote. They've just launched a massive smear campaign against humanity. Accusations, fabricated evidence, threats of war if the Council doesn't expel you. Carter's grip on the datapad tightened. The screen displayed broadcasts from HFY-controlled media. playing edited footage of human conflicts, twisting the narrative to make humanity look like a destabilizing force. "They're making us look like warmongers," Carter muttered. Arya nodded. "And it's working. The Dreks are panicking. The Zenkai are pulling away, saying they won't support a species that threatens peace." Carter exhaled sharply. "We're losing them." Arya hesitated before adding, "It gets worse. The HFY have called an emergency pre-vote meeting. They're trying to convince the council to vote tonight." Carter's heart pounded. "They're rushing the decision before we can turn the tide." Arya gave a grim nod. "If you don't stop them now, humanity will be expelled by morning." The emergency meeting. Carter stormed into the council chamber, his presence drawing immediate attention. Telfor was already at the center of the room, addressing the gathered delegates. His voice was smooth, confident, and filled with venom. "Honored members of the council," Telfor said, "the evidence against humanity is overwhelming. They are reckless, violent, and disruptive. Every moment they remain here, they threaten the balance we have worked so hard to maintain. The time for debate is over. We must act now." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The XLFAR had been working in the shadows, manipulating emotions, twisting facts, and it was working. Carter stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "You want to rush this vote because you're afraid." All eyes turned to him. Zelfor's smug expression barely faltered. "Afraid?" he repeated mockingly. "No, Ambassador Carter. We are merely ensuring swift justice." Carter took a slow breath. "Justice." He turned to the council. "You are being played. The XLFAR fear humanity, not because we are dangerous, but because we are free. Because we do not bow. Because we do not let those in power dictate who gets to survive and who gets to suffer." He turned to the Zenkai delegate, Vostelephone. "You once told me the Zenkai consider the past, present, and future before making a decision. Look at history. How many times has a ruling power used fear to justify eliminating those who refuse to kneel? And how many times has that led to tyranny?" Vostel's golden eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he remained silent. Carter turned to the Drex delegate, Caltris. "You value profit above all else. Tell me, Minister, who profits in a galaxy where fear controls trade? Who profits when the XLFAR decide that your economy is too disruptive next?" Caltris clicked his mandibles thoughtfully, his eyes shifting toward XLFAR. Finally, Carter faced Lyris, the Valerian Chancellor. "You asked me if humanity seeks power or balance. I told you we seek justice. If you vote us out today, you are not preserving balance. You are handing it over to those who see control as more important than freedom." The chamber was silent. The tension was thick, the decision hanging in the air. Zelfor's voice broke the silence. "Enough words." He turned to the council. "We vote now." A digital screen flickered to life. One by one, the council members cast their votes. Carter watched, his heart pounding. Humanity's fate would be decided in seconds. The council chamber was deathly silent as the voting screen flickered. Carter stood still, his hands clenched behind his back, his heart pounding like a war drum. The fate of humanity rested in the hands of these alien delegates. One by one, the names of the council members lit up in green or red. Green for keeping humanity in the Galactic Council, red for expelling them. The first votes came in fast. The XLFAR Dominion, red, expected. The Gruzzel Empire, red, also expected. The Ralkesh clans, green, loyal allies. The Ulari Republic, green, Arya had done her part. The Drex Consortium, green. Carter exhaled slowly. The Drex had accepted his trade offer. That was one major victory. More votes poured in. Some sided with the XLFAR, others with humanity. It was close. Too close. Then came the final three undecided factions. The Zenkai Dominion, green. A whisper ran through the chamber. The Zen-K were ancient and wise. Their vote carried weight. Now it was down to the Valerians. Carter held his breath as Chancellor Lyris's vote appeared on the screen. Green. A surge of hope ran through Carter's veins. But the final count wasn't done yet. The HFY still had powerful allies. A final name appeared on the screen. The deciding vote. The High Chancellor. Xelthor grinned as he stepped forward. As High Chancellor, I hold the power to cast the tie-breaking vote, he said smoothly. And I vote. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the tension build. Then he smiled cruelly. Red. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The final tally was tied. 50% for humanity. 50% against. Carter felt a cold weight settle in his chest. A tie meant the High Chancellor's vote overruled the rest. Humanity had lost. Xelthor spread his arms. The decision is clear, he announced. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. His voice was smooth, but Carter caught the satisfaction behind it. The HFY had played their game well. They had won. Or so they thought. The unbreakable law. Before Xelthor could continue, a new voice rang through the chamber. Objection. Every head turned. Chancellor Lyris, the crystalline leader of the Valerians, stepped forward, his glowing body shimmering with power. The High Chancellor's vote is invalid. Xelthor's smug expression flickered. What nonsense is this? Lyris's eyes glowed. You forget the oldest law of the Galactic Council. No species may be expelled by a mere majority. It requires a supermajority of 2/3. A murmur spread through the delegates. The 2/3 rule was an ancient safeguard, created to prevent powerful factions from forcing others out unjustly. It had never been used in modern times, until now. Carter allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The HFY had tried to cheat the system, and in their arrogance, they had forgotten the law that humanity had memorized. Lyris turned to the assembly. The final vote does not meet the required threshold. Humanity stays. Silence. Then a thunderous uproar filled the chamber. Some delegates shouted in protest, others in relief. The HFY delegation was furious. Xelthor's smugness vanished in an instant. His crimson eyes burned with rage. This is an insult, he bellowed. Humanity is a plague upon this council. You would let them remain. Lyris's glowing form stood firm. The law is clear. You lost. Xelthor's claws twitched at his side. His people were used to winning. They weren't used to being outmaneuvered. For a long moment, it seemed like he might lash out. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out of the chamber, his delegates following behind him. Carter let out a slow breath. Humanity had survived. For now. The aftermath. The council meeting was officially dismissed. As the delegates left, some congratulated Carter. Others glared at him with open hatred. Aria approached, shaking her head in amazement. That was incredible, she said. You outplayed the HFY at their own game. Carter smirked. We don't always win battles with weapons. Sometimes we win them with knowledge. She nodded, but her expression turned serious. You know this isn't over, right? The HFY won't stop. They'll come at you another way. Carter's expression hardened. I know, and we'll be ready. As he stepped out of the council chamber, he looked up at the endless stars beyond the city skyline. Humanity was still in the Galactic Council, but the war for its future was just beginning. Carter stood on the balcony of the human embassy, staring out at the glowing cityscape of the Galactic Council's capital. The battle inside the chamber had been won, but the war for humanity's place among the stars was far from over. Behind him, the doors slid open with a soft hiss. Aria Vel stepped out, her expression unreadable. You made a lot of enemies today. Carter let out a dry chuckle. Wouldn't be the first time. She stepped beside him, her translucent blue skin reflecting the lights of the city. The HFY won't accept this defeat quietly. They've ruled through intimidation for centuries, and you just proved they can be beaten. Carter exhaled. Which means they'll come at us harder. Arya nodded. They've already started. She handed him a datapad. Carter's eyes narrowed as he skimmed the screen. Reports of human trading ships being ambushed on the edges of CLFAR-controlled space. Political pressure being applied to human colonies. Whispers of war. This is their retaliation, Arya said. They can't remove you legally, so they'll try to make humanity's life unbearable until you either leave voluntarily or collapse. Carter clenched his jaw. He had known the XLFAR wouldn't give up easily, but they were escalating. The council divides. The next day, Carter returned to the council chamber. As expected, the air was tense. The XLFAR had begun their next move. Their allies spread rumors, painting humanity as a disruptive force that had twisted the law to stay in power. The fragile alliances Carter had built were under threat. As he took his seat, Selthor himself stood. His crimson robes flowed behind him, his voice sharp as a blade. Honorable members of the council, he began, his tone measured but filled with controlled fury. Yesterday's ruling may have allowed humanity to remain, but I ask you, at what cost? Murmurs filled the chamber. Selthor gestured grandly. Since their arrival, humanity has brought nothing but conflict and unpredictability. They manipulate laws, they corrupt alliances, they disrupt order. And now, because of their reckless defiance, the stability of this council is at risk. He turned, his glowing eyes locking onto Carter. So I ask again, should they remain, knowing that their presence only ensures chaos? Silence. Carter stood, his expression calm but unyielding. You speak of chaos, Chancellor XL4, but let me ask, who is truly responsible for this instability? Zelthor narrowed his eyes. Carter stepped forward. Who spreads false reports of human aggression? Who manipulates weaker factions into fearing us? Who attacks innocent human ships under the guise of security measures? More murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of the neutral delegates shifted uncomfortably. Carter pressed on. You don't want stability, XL4. You want obedience. You don't fear chaos. You fear a species that won't bow. The room fell into heavy silence. Thor's lips curled in a snarl, but he didn't respond. He didn't have to. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Carter knew he had bought humanity time. But time wouldn't be enough. Preparing for the storm. Back at the embassy, Carter sat in his office, staring at the latest reports. Arya paced nearby, her expression troubled. The XLFAR won't stop, she said. If you're going to survive, you need more than politics. Carter nodded. We need allies. Real ones. The kind who will stand beside us if this turns into something bigger. Arya hesitated before saying, there's someone who might help. A faction even the XLFAR avoid. Carter looked up. Who? She met his gaze. The Aurak Syndicate. Carter exhaled. The Aurak were not part of the Galactic Council. They were outlaws, a loose alliance of pirates, smugglers, and rogue fleets. Dangerous, unpredictable, but powerful. If we bring them in, Carter said carefully, we're declaring to the entire council that we're willing to fight. Arya gave him a grim look. You might not have a choice. Carter stared at the map on his datapad, showing the growing tension across the galaxy. The XLFAR had made their move. Now, it was humanity's turn.